Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so are we ready to go?
Yes.
Great. I will share my screen now and I will start. So hello everybody. Hello to everyone who are in the room and those who have joined us online. My name is Snehashish Banerjee. I am from the University of York School for Business and Society, and my research interest lies. I'm passionate about studying how individuals, businesses, and society as a whole can make the most of technology while obviating the risks that technology has to offer. And one of my current projects is about the use of the internet by older people. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. So here is a bit of a background of this research. I think humans are an inherently curious species. We have a lot of curiosity, and throughout our daily lives, we often feel uncertain and we want to make sense of uncertainties in our lives. And that's where we have what is called an information need. And as soon as we have an information need, we go to the internet to look up for information. This is really a huge advantage these days because we have access to information. So access to information is now no longer a problem, which is great. But there is a caveat. And the caveat is that there could be a lot of misinformation, and a lot has already been spoken about this topic in this conference throughout the day. And because there could be so much of misinformation and fake news camouflaged amid facts, that for the layperson who does not have domain expertise on a particular topic, it is very difficult, if not impossible, to distinguish between what is genuine and what is false, what is authentic and what is fictitious. Now, this problem it kind of became worse during the pandemic, because during the pandemic, when people wanted to satisfy their information needs by going onto the internet, they were having access to an avalanche of information, which the World Health Organization termed as the infodemic. So the pandemic in the offline world was giving rise to an infodemic in the online world, which made lives difficult for lay people who were finding it very difficult to grapple between the idea of which information to trust and which information to ignore or even discard and completely kind of don't bother about it and so on. And this problem was particularly prevalent. I mean, it was evident that while all the entire population would be facing this problem could be worse for older people because they're always assumed to be lying at the other end of the digital divide. Now, in an earlier session, we have spoken about digital divide and the economic divide and the empowerment divide and so on. I think in my talk, I am not really focusing more about the economic divide, where older people don't have access to buy digital products, whereas I'm focusing more about the empowerment aspect, like how older people don't always feel confident enough to use technology. And moreover, what makes the challenge for older people even more difficult is that there are a lot of digital threats out there in the online setting. There are scams, there are fraudsters, and so older people are particularly cautious about having online thefts and losing money by sharing passwords and other sensitive information with others. And what made even worse was the fact that during the pandemic, because of the social distancing requirements, they could not always have access to people within their family members who could actually help them address the problems that they were facing online. So they were lonely. They had to they almost had no choice but to use technology because of the weird circumstances through which the world was going. And also many of them did not have access to the face-to-face support with their friends and family members and networks, which meant that if they were struggling to solve a problem, they were kind of stuck and had little mechanism to cope with that problem and continue with their information consumption practices. So that's why COVID kind of gave us an interesting context to study the challenges that older people face when it comes to the use of the internet. So based on this background, here is the objective of our research: to explore how people aged 65 plus search and process COVID-19 information. So this was the overarching objective of this research. The study context was the UK, and we relied on the academic literature around technology adoption and technology use. And one of the very dominant theories is the unified theory of acceptance and use of technology by Venkatesh et al., which has consistently documented the role of age, the age-based digital divide. And it has consistently shown that people who are at the wrong end of the digital divide, who are aged, are very slow in terms of using technology compared with the younger generation, which is a kind of no-brainer. But then, and of course, there is literature which suggests that people can be easily deceived by hoaxes, but then the literature kind of lacks a rich understanding of how people process information during a crisis like the COVID-19, and how older people make sense of the infodemic that was out there during the pandemic. So that kind of gave us an interesting context to study older people's internet use. So this is our objective and rationale for this research. And in terms of methods, we conducted 28 in-depth interviews, and these were conducted during periods of strict lockdown and vaccine rollout in the UK. All the participants aged 65 plus and were internet users. So, which meant that we were not really targeting those participants who had no access to internet or who have never used internet, but we were specifically looking for those elderly who somewhat use the internet, but still they struggle. So those were the kind of our target participants. So because if there was participants who have never used the internet, we did not want to make them, we did not want to understand how they use the internet, because they will be struggling for sure. But we wanted to study how people who already use the internet were doing. It's kind of that we were studying the sort of tech-savvy older people in this research, so to say. During the interview, these were some of the discussion areas. So we tried to kind of understand how COVID-19 related online information is perceived, analyzed, acted upon, and potentially shared with others through online channels. What is the overall experience of finding COVID-19 related information online? And what do they find easy and what are the challenges? And on top of that, we also asked them to do some navigation of the information search online, and we recorded their screens. So instead of just them saying to us what they were going through, we also kind of tracked what they were actually doing during the process of looking for online information related to COVID-19. So we had the in-depth interview and the screen recordings, and then we analyzed this qualitative data to infer the findings. I will talk about some of the key findings and key policy implications. But before that, because we captured the screen recordings, I have a video to show to all of you. Can you see the video?
Yes.
I can see it.
Okay, thank you.
Is there supposed to be sound for this video?
Yes.
Okay, we might need to. Share with sound? Yeah, so you're gonna need to share with computer audio, otherwise we're not able to hear that.
Let me try sharing again.
Okay, thank you. And then, yeah, I think there should be an option to share with computer audio. And I think if you click that, we should be able to hear.
I'm not really getting any option to. Shall I send the link of that video and then you play it at your end?
Yeah, that would work. If you could just put it in the
I
chat.
think that will be simpler. Yeah. I will send it through the chat.
Thank you.
Sorry for this.
Clear, but if you just Enfield Council's website is not.
And then press on the plus at the top.
I can't see a plus. What do I normally do?
So if you keep going up, yeah, and then across from there.
Because I could go to my email. Well, if I went to my email one and used that and crossed, you don't want me to do that, though, do you? I can't see a plus.
I know it looks like it's. I don't know. It looks like it's almost wasting space. You know, on the right hand side over here,
Mm.
yeah, there's the advert there, and there's a great big block here,
Mm.
and to me, it's just it doesn't look very neat.
I'm always very reluctant to touch anything that begins with ad. I don't
Okay.
know
Why is that?
Because I always think they're trying to sell me something.
Yeah. Party send you many COVID-related emails.
Yeah, they do, and that's the problem. I get too many. So we were talking about this last night. You end up not reading them or clicking and thinking I'll read it later.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not easy to see, really. I mean, it got the top level there when I went in, and so I knew the total first and second doses, and I was then just wondering how that had been, how the second dose.
Common questions. What are the organs most affected?
This is actually not very clear. 'Cause
Right.
if you read that information, it looks like it's for people who haven't had it yet.
Okay.
God, it's terrible to see. So I don't know that I can find that one. Yeah.
I end up back at Google
Why shouldn't you use Google?
because it's following me all over. I mean, it's got a monopoly on information because I've got location on my phone and it knows exactly where I've been. I use it as a Gmail. I suppose I should go. What's the word? Not anonymous. That you can sort of change your settings on it, but I do feel that it knows exactly all about you.
I'm a great supporter of the fact that disinformation is dangerous, and I am aware that a lot of disinformation happens on the web. But I'm not a person who's easily influenced, Edo.
Simply
Right.
logically, I would think that because I'm not into the conspiracy theories at all without any evidence, I would think, I tend to think, and I do have a doctor friend whose opinion I trust. You know, I would have thought they'd give you either of them if there was any risk in them.
What could they have done better, or what are they missing on this site that could help with that?
Well, I think that they need to. I think it needs spelling out in very clear form. You know, so there'd be a headline: travel. This means at this point. This means that you can do this. See, this is set out much better in those boxes. So
In what way?
Well, it's you've got little subtitles with clear. These are the symptoms. These are what you do. Vaccination, all that. Rather than we looked at the last one I've looked at, it was all sort of linear and a lot of print. Whereas this is, I think, easier to take in.
But yeah, no, but it's really interesting that you wouldn't be interested in this page, and that's absolutely fine. Like, if you're welcome to come out of this page and look for something else if this isn't for you. I guess
Sorry, I'll do as I'm told.
No, you're welcome to come out of it. I was just interested why you didn't feel like it was for you. So you said it's like the language used. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Well, nothing's definite, is it? Which I know nothing's definite anyway.
And What is it about the diagram that you like?
Well, you've got little symbols to help you, and it's very clear. It's the symbol plus the writing around them.
I think we are done with the video, so I will share my screen again and I will continue for the rest of my presentation, if that's all right.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. So yeah, I will just highlight a few key findings from this research. One particularly evident pattern was the difficulty that the participants faced in discerning the truth. And many of them focused on source credibility. For example, here is a participant who says, I could trust it because it's a government website, and if they put something on that was totally wrong, they would have to answer to that. So I would trust the site because they're at least accountable. And here is another quote which says, there's a hell lot of people who are more influenced perhaps by social media, listening to other people who have listened to somebody and spreading stuff about. And this was a pattern which we found again and again, that the older people in our sample, they valued source credibility, but they always adopted an if in doubt, avoid approach to unfamiliar sites. So anything which is familiar and they are very much confident that this must be a credible source like BBC or the government website, they were willing to trust it. But as soon as there is a website which is slightly not so verified to be true, they were not willing to explore, but they were just willing to kind of avoid. This was a very prominent pattern which emerged from the data. Another is inclination to share information. Here is a participant who says, I use WhatsApp quite a lot. So there is a lot of WhatsApp chat groups and a lot of things get shared around within those. One thing appears in one group, and if it's for me, for instance, I like it, I forward it onto the family group. Another participant says, a lot of the information I get, I will pass on to my friend just in case she hasn't seen it. And with this kind of quotes, the pattern which emerged is that information sharing often happens among older people without verification, which means that these people, because they don't always verify before sharing information, they can become passages for the spread of misinformation. These were just two very interesting findings that emerged from the literature, but I won't be going through all findings, but I will move on to some key implications before I end. One is about how this demographic segment can stay safe online. I think there is a challenge, and for every challenge, can also view that challenge as an opportunity for policy making and for society as a whole. So a huge challenge which older people face is that they run the risk of stunting their internet literacy in their efforts to avoid doing anything wrong or unsafe online. As I have mentioned, they were always adopting the if in doubt, avoid approach, which meant that they were very conscious of not doing anything wrong or unsafe online, but it also meant that they were not willing to explore. They were not making the best possible use of what technology has to offer to them through the internet. And I think here's an opportunity to meet this challenge. We often have workshops organized by libraries in the city, and city councils often organize sessions. In cities like York, there is something called 100% digital. There is 100% digital Leeds, 100% digital York that helps to promote the IT literacy among citizens. And I think workshops organized by these kind of stakeholders should help older people strike a better balance between being right and being open to use the internet. Currently, older people they are a bit too fearful about doing anything wrong or unsafe online. The next implication is about access to appropriate training. A common complaint from the participants was that the provided classes were either too advanced or too easy for them, and they could not find the right fit in terms of meeting their training needs. And again, I think this is where one-to-one coaching about how to use internet could be a way forward. And also we could promote more intergenerational dialogues with younger family members talking to the older people about how to use technology, how to use the tablet, how to use iPhone. I think that kind of intergenerational exchanges, conversations will really play a part in terms of bridging this digital divide. Another point which emerged quite prominently from the data is about social media resistance, because we found that social media failed to inspire confidence among most of the older participants. Which means that if companies such as Facebook have to bring older people on board, they need to rethink their strategy. Because sometimes it is important for older people to have access to social media. For example, NHS, on its Facebook page, it was sharing updates about COVID. So if older people were using Facebook, they could have used Facebook to get those information. So once in a while, I wouldn't say that social media is all gloom and doom. Social media has its strengths as well. And older people, if they're on social media, it could become one more avenue for health organizations to reach older people in times of need. And the final point is about fact-checking websites. There are a lot of fact-checking websites like snoops.com and factcheck.org. In fact, during the pandemic, the World Health Organization maintained, within their website, they maintained a Mythbuster website where they were dealing with different misinformation and fake news and were trying to debunk them. We realized that several participants actually doubted the authenticity of fact-checking websites. Many of them were kind of suspicious about fact-checking websites and almost treated a fact-checking website as if they were propagating misinformation. That's where the key implication is that fact-checking websites should be designed and promoted more strategically. Their design should inspire confidence, and they should be also promoted to the right people, because there is no point in preaching to the converted, because those who are tech savvy probably wouldn't need a fact-checking website, whereas those who are not tech savvy, they are the people for whom a fact-checking website is going to be really useful. But we found out that many of the older people were not even aware of fact-checking websites and were not really keen to engage with them. So I have just given quite a few examples of how different stakeholders can do a little bit more to help older people. And the conclusion that I think is a takeaway message from this presentation is that society as a whole can do just a little bit more to better support older people in achieving their full potential in using the internet. If we can do that much better in terms of supporting older people, making them feel more comfortable, more confident in using technology, then the cyberspace will be a better place and the online community will be much more inclusive with the older engaging with the youth and vice versa. On a final note, I would like to thank my research team at York and also the British Academy, which funded this project. And with that, I will conclude. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We have our next speaker, Margaret Crow, who's going to be presenting now. And we'll save the questions for the end.
So good afternoon, and this is probably a good segue into this digital literacy piece because you'll see me on two screens. My computer camera's not working, so I'm on my phone, but I'll be able to share my screen with you all today. But I'm Dr. Margie Crow. I'm from South College. I live outside of Washington, D.C. to kind of give you a bit of context of what I'm going to be talking about today. I want to say thank you. I can't see who's in the audience, but assuming there's some of you there, and I just want to show my gratitude for coming here today and sharing this space with us, and for the honor to be here with all of you at Oxford. And what I will be speaking about today is what I call a systemic failure socially here in the US. So between tech literacy and post-traditional student persistence in higher education. And to give you a bit of background about this, here we consider adult learners post-traditional learners. So these are going to be adults that are over the age of 25, that have full-time jobs, that may or may not be digital natives, may or may not be digital immigrants. It's a mix of students from maybe 25 to 80 years old that are in higher education at very much higher rates than we've ever seen before. We do know that there's a lot of best practices and strategies out there for our K-12 students, which are our students that are, from 5 years old through 18 in our high school system. But then oftentimes there's this gap between that primary education level and then when they come into higher education. And so we know that they need different types of supports and strategies to help them achieve their post-graduation goals. But what we've been finding over time, as I've been teaching in the higher education and teaching undergraduate students, that there seems to be in the disaggregate, right? So we can look at all these strategies and supports that we know adult learners need, but one in particular keeps coming up, which is this tech literacy deficit that we're seeing about being able to truly access the technology and therefore able to go into career fields, which we now know 90% of them here in the US require some sort of basic tech literacy skills. And so where is that all going to happen? If it didn't happen at the primary school level, it's not necessarily built into higher education, but it's certainly where we want to help and support them along the way. Adding to that is how are we going to grow STEM career fields and other career fields here and globally that require students or have our adult learners needing these basic tech literacy skills, just the basic skills to be able to do their jobs. Okay, so the way I kind of present, for those of you that maybe have been to some conferences where there's unconferences, is that I love to have audience feedback, and I know we have a Q&A at the end, but I'm always very open to people unmiking and sharing their experiences and their observations along the way, because I consider these learning opportunities for all of us. And it's through this collaboration that we can kind of maybe start to make some headway and definitely some grounded theory on how to best support our students. So my observations are based on, for 25 years of working in bringing in leaders and adult learners into STEM career fields. So I spent 20 years in the US Air Force doing this specifically, and then now doing this in higher education and creating curriculum and faculty development. One second when I move my course there. Sorry, I'm working on two screens here, so I appreciate your patience with me. So adult learner characteristics. So we used to call these non-traditional students, but now literature has changed and we now identify them as post-traditional students, and they have a very specific characteristic. And I want to just share with you what that landscape looks like. Okay, so they're usually over the age of 25. They have caregiver responsibilities, part-time or full-time jobs, sometimes 2 jobs, and they're going to school full-time. Our undergraduates here in the US, 60% of them are considered post-traditional students. So this is quite a shift from the era that I came in, where most of our undergraduates were traditional students. Even our graduate students are considered post-traditional because most of them are going to be over that age of 25 when they go through their graduate work, and they're going to have the same competing requirements. Most of them are full-time working while they're in full-time graduate school. So also, when we're looking at all of this in the aggregate, we realize that student learners have changed. So whether it's our traditional learners or if it's our adult learners, that their persistence models show that they seek to persist. So a lot of them are no longer coming into higher education with this quest for knowledge and higher level learning. It really is how they can connect their course content to their post-graduation goals. So this persistence model we know from Dr. Vincent Tinto has shifted to show that they seek to persist, not just to be retained in their coursework. And with that means that we have to provide supports for them in this digital era. So there's a lot of barriers to education for them, to including tuition cost, enough time to complete their studies, the things we talked about already in terms of all their responsibilities. But on top of it, we are finding that there is this digital literacy, or what we call tech literacy issues here, of just not having the skill sets in order to be able to access the curriculum. And so many students are online. And then post-graduation, 90% of the jobs here in the US that are currently available require some sort of basic tech literacy skills. So with that, we have also seen in some recent studies that of the 90% of those jobs that are out there, we only have 40% of our adult learner population that actually possesses those basic skills. So we see that there's this big disconnect between the jobs that are out there, the tech literacy that's required to get through their higher education programs, and then what is waiting on the other side of that, with only 40% of them having those basic skills. So we know that this causes a ripple effect from coming into higher education to the employers that they're going to have afterwards. And what do we do with that? Because here it's what I would consider a systemic failure. So this gives you an idea of kind of where these basic skill sets are and where the deficits are. And these are for our adult learners in the US. So with that said, some of the things that we are doing at our institution to kind of address this, because we recognize that we can't go back into when people had their K-12 education and build in all this digital literacy. For a while, we were thinking that it was really a digital native versus a digital immigrant issue where, okay, maybe we're fine once our digital immigrants kind of move out of the higher education system and our digital natives come in and they know how to use the technology, but that isn't showing to be true. So even with our undergraduate students, we're starting them out with a tech literacy just survey in the first few days in one of their courses, and it gives the instructors the opportunity to look to see where students can self-identify that I do not know how to use Microsoft Office. I don't know how to use my learning management system. I've mostly operated off my cell phone to do my schoolwork, and it gives those instructors an idea of where the tech literacy skills are for these particular students coming in at the undergraduate level. And then their charge is to reach out and collaborate with these students and show them all the supports that we have available to them to help increase that tech literacy skill. So this is one place that's doing it, but we know this is a much bigger issue nationally for us, as most of our adult learners don't even have the basic skills to do this. So this is why I was really keen to be here with all of you today and in this particular forum, because we recognize that this is probably more of a global issue, that it's likely not just a US issue. It's not going to just be our undergraduates. The access to technology, like the speaker before me, we know that accessibility is an issue, and it's not just a US issue. It's not just a higher education issue, but I'm coming from the standpoint of, okay, well, we start where we stand. So where's our sphere of influence? And what can we do? So within my role at the college that I work at, I'm trying to work with that tech literacy, digital literacy piece to kind of build that into our undergraduate level. We're also building it in with supports for our faculty and staff at the institution, so they feel like they have the skills to also support our students. And it's this ongoing process and journey, and why I wanted to be here with all of you today, because I would love to hear your experience. I know what it was like for me when I was in the military and trying to bring in students at that time into STEM career fields who didn't have the digital literacy even then, and knowing what we had to do to grow that through our higher education institutions for the military, seeing it on the civilian side now and seeing that's also a continued struggle. And we know our STEM career fields are historically understaffed. And so we need to kind of look at this entire ecosystem of how we create this digital literacy from childhood all the way through what the previous speaker was speaking about with our elderly. So this is very much a global issue to look at. It's along with the higher education challenges that I face in my job. So with that, I would love to hear comments or hear experiences. And the former speaker, I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name. I'm having tech issues here because clearly I'm a digital immigrant that's fumbling with my technology as well all the time. But I think our topics very much overlap and mirror each other, and just really enjoyed your presentation.
Yeah, same here, and don't worry about my name.
So I don't know if we are ready for the Q&A, or I'm very much an on-conference person, so I love to collaborate and just hear everybody.
Yes, we have a comment here.
Yeah, well, it's basically a question of how to disentangle skills, because my name is Søren Skarp. I'm from Denmark, and one of the things I can see from my own work is that skills are based on skills. So if your reading and writing skills are poor, then that's an obstacle for acquiring many basic digital skills. If you are, so there's a number of things that sort of are intertwined. So that's one thing, how to disentangle what's actually the digital element in this.
Right.
And the other thing is that basic digital skills is a moving target. And so how do we pin it down? Can we pin it down? Can we abstract it to some level where it's not as dynamic? Is there some basic things you need to learn that sort of can help you learn other things? And maybe that's what we should focus on. I was thinking about your example with Microsoft Word, for instance. Like, I can see with some of my students at the university that they can use Word, but they don't use Word. I mean, it's like the basic concept of a document, of sort of structure of a document. They don't have the basic concept, so they may be able to sort of press the buttons, but they don't really know what they're doing. Sorry, that was several questions in one.
No, but no, that's exactly the observations that I've been having as well, because I started as an instructor for those that very first, we call it college management course, right? So this is the basic skills we hope that they have so they can get through their first year and persist and move on. And as I taught the course and then took over the course and rewrote the course and then moved into other positions, I'm still studying it and watching it. We do a metacognition survey at the beginning and the end of that course to see if these supports that we put in, which is the digital literacy piece, we put in some support because we know a lot of our students here are coming in 3 and 4 years below level for English and math skills, where maybe 10, 15 years ago, it was remedial math and English. Maybe somebody would have to take, but these huge gaps now in their education coming in. And so you're right, to how to disaggregate that and look at, okay, is it the English comp skills? Is it the basic level math skills? Is it the digital literacy piece of it? Is it all of it? And then how do we grow that? And how do we help them increase that? Because at the same time, they're struggling with wanting to persist, which is they're wanting to just get to the end state, right? So they're just wanting to get to that degree. And so if I can't find a way to make them understand that these skills are important, they're not going to really engage in them. And we're finding that when they do drop out and when they leave, it's not because they can't do the work, it's because they don't do the work. So our metacognition surveys that we're doing that we were kind of hoping would show us how to pinpoint exactly what you're talking about, which one of these things do we target? What it's showing us instead is that they're leaving because of procrastination and task avoidance. So then I added a component to that survey of, okay, why? Why are you going? Because I was hoping to see, it's because I don't feel like I have strength in my writing skills. It's because I'm struggling with the LMS system, and literally Microsoft Word sometimes is the thing that stops them from finishing the course, being able to upload the document, being able to save the document as I used to get blank documents back. I created templates. I thought, well, let me create templates because maybe it's just creating the document that's stopping them. And then they would upload the blank document. So it's that piece of it. And then they just kind of shut down. And so we are struggling just to look at this, so much so that's become part of our 5-year strategic study that we do at our institution for reaccreditation, is looking at this persistence piece. And we do have a lot of adult learners. So most of them are going to be adult learners. 80% of these students that are undergraduates are they're not quite digital immigrants, but they're kind of on that cusp of being natives and immigrants, and somewhere in between did not have the skills. So we've tried to also pair English Comp with this course and maybe have the same instructor teach both, because we know building that sense of community and trust may make them advocate a bit more. So I'm really interested to hear your experience too, because I feel like we are literally we needed to start doing some studies on this, because I don't think we have good data on what to do.
There's also another issue, that's the transferability of skills. Like if you're very good at Counter-Strike, that doesn't necessarily make you good at Excel. And so that's why I was talking about sort of, is there something, a level below the particular program or package that sort of can be used to build on. So when we talk basic digital skills, do we have to get below the level of Word or whatever program we're talking about? Because many people, it's very difficult in adult education, because you haven't had that long sort of period of just experimenting and coming across different technologies that you find out you can use for various purposes during your life. If you do that, you build up a sort of a basic sense of technology, I would say. It's not a skill, it's a sense. So you have some ways of navigating new programs and stuff. But if you don't have that, how do we teach it as a specific set of skills when we don't know what those skills are?
Right. I think that's part of the admissions process. Maybe there should be a screening tool to kind of assess that digital literacy, which is why we put it in the course for the instructors to see in the first 3 days, at least students that would self-identify. And we do it on a Likert scale, and that way they don't have to send an email, because some of it was embarrassment, like they didn't want to tell their instructors that they did not know how to use the technology. We do offer a course that's mandatory for our undergrads, that's basic kind of computer literacy, but even that's difficult at times. So your idea to do something one level below that is probably a really great idea. Is this something you're thinking about doing a study on?
No, not really, because it's something that we in Denmark we were introducing at all levels of education. Okay. Computational skills. It's called computational skills, but it isn't really computational skills. It's sort of like a basic idea of what the digital is and does. Some of it is also aimed at sort of introducing them to sort of the underlying ideas of programming, but it's not the core of it. But it's very early days, and we really don't know how this what effect it will have. We only know that in 10 years or so. Right. It takes a long time, yeah.
It does. So what are your observations on things that you think are working? Because I know some things are anecdotal, but I think we can kind of see them with our own eyes when we're trying different things with our students.
I don't know much about adult education. I do know that for some people they discover perhaps a little bit late but that's more for vocational training. I mean, they discover that they have reading and writing difficulties, and that they have to address these issues before they can start teaching them how to use a sort of a complex machine with a complex interface, because they may understand. They may have, if you've been working in a sort of machine factory for a long time, you have a lot of understanding of materials and processes, right, and sort of physical technology, but to translate that into the abstraction of computer-controlled machinery, it requires that you can read and write. So you have a solid amount of domain skills, but you don't have the sort of the understanding the abstraction. But that's but that's one thing. The other thing is that it's in adult education, as you're saying, they and especially of course in the US, it's a different issue in Scandinavia. But if their focus is very much on the degree and what they can use it for, then this should be part of the degree, so to speak. It should be part, because they can't use their degree if they don't have acquired these skills as well. So it should not be something outside the curriculum. It should be part of it, because that may motivate people more to actually do it. That's one idea.
No, absolutely. Building it within, and I think, you know, there was a study I just saw where it was trying to correlate the education level with the basic tech literacy skills and where they would fall into the different job market for earning. And, you know, as somebody who's done, like most of us are analysts, right? This scatter diagram was all over the place. I'm thinking, well, that doesn't help me at all, right? So that helps me not whatsoever to determine, okay, if this person has this level of education, they're going to earn this. And, you know, and it's so disjointed that it's hard to focus on where to help and where to start. But like you said, with the basic literacy skills and math skills, we do know that. So we do know that is proven in research over and over again. If students in that first year of post-high school, you know, post-college for the UK, that first year, we know if they are getting like B or higher, so a higher passing grade in their English comp and their basic math class, that they're likely going to make it past the first year of university. So we know that they have to have those skills because those do carry across different areas and getting into those higher level tech skills. So here, even our certificate programs, which aren't full 4-year degrees or our 2-year degree programs, even if they're more what we consider gray collar positions where maybe they're a medical assistant, they're going to still need these basic tech skills from just the equipment they're using. And so how to build that in and how to help them when they've spent the first 25 years or so without having those basic digital literacy skills is the struggle when you have such a short period of time, right? You're talking about 10 years of trying to grow these skills, and sometimes we have 1 year or 2 years at the university level to help them with that.
Yeah, thank you. In fact, I also have a question for the first speaker, if he's still around. Are you there?
Yes, I'm still around.
Okay. My question is, what is it that's so special with the elderly? Now, that sounds like a strange question, but there's sort of 3 ways of looking at age. That's probably more, but I usually see 3 ways. One is generation. That is, we have a generation that has not been exposed to technology as much as younger people, and they usually come from a time when the sort of the general level of education in society was lower, so they're less educated, and they have been less exposed to technology. But that's a generational issue. If that was the only issue, it will go away, basically. The second issue is the age, biological. If there's some component, as if we are slower learners when we get older, I think there's a lot of recent research that shows that's not true, but that at least is part of the discourse. And the final thing is life phase. So people have different priorities and different needs and different phases of life. And they also, once you leave the labor market, your network shrinks. And your exposure to new technologies, whatever level that have been, will also be less. And that will never go away. So when I get old and gray, there will be technologies that I simply give up on. Also, because I mentioned this with priorities, I interviewed this guy who was about, I think he was 81, and he was actually an engineer and worked in engineering his whole life. But this whole digital stuff, he didn't have time for it because now he had time to fish. And it was a lot more important. For him, it was a matter of priorities, basically. And you may not have the same needs. So my question really is, what is it that makes the elderly so, many of the things you observed, don't you think you could have observed them with the younger people as well?
I think what makes them special, one of the key facets when it comes to the elderly and technology is the resistance to change and just the lack of confidence. It's almost like an inherent belief that they are too old to learn and technology is too complex to use. I think that's the kind of a mindset which so is very common among the elderly, but that is not prevalent among the younger generation. And I would say that makes a huge difference. Just that mentality that I'm too old to learn and technology is too complex to use. Because that creates that resistance to change, which means that if I have to bring that older people on board in terms of using technology, embracing technology more wholeheartedly, one has to try that much harder in terms of persuading them and to, and if the example which you gave about that fishing is more important than digital using technology, so that's absolutely fine. But the thing is that I think the society is moving at such a rapid pace that there are certain aspects of life which requires technology. For example, banking sector. These days, if you can't have an online banking, if you can't use online banking, it makes it very difficult for banks to engage with older customers. So I think there is a limit to how much technology an older person has to engage with. Of course, there are priorities, and fishing could be much more important than using technology just for the sake of it. But at the same time, it is important for older people to engage with technology that are meaningful, that are going to be helpful in their life. And I just gave the example of banking. So I think banking organizations have their task cut out in terms of bringing their older customers on board. And this is, again, a skill which surely the older people needs to kind of master. Even though if they don't master, at least they should be kind of familiar with and fairly confident in using technology. And I think what sometimes prevents them is the data which we collected is just that the lack of confidence. They feel that this is just too complicated and they will be struggling. And when we looked at the ways in which people use technology, we found that some were like quite good in terms of navigating through the challenges, while others would like go down the wrong path. For example, they would trust a dubious website or even end up sharing it with somebody on WhatsApp. And some others were kind of willing to give up. As soon as they hit a roadblock, they were like, what am I doing? This is just getting too frustrating for me, and they would give up. While some were actually quite patient in terms of they would hit a roadblock, they would realize, okay, this is something which I'm doing incorrectly, and they would restart the process. And I feel that these are the kind of older people who are willing to learn. And I think it's important that we move towards an inclusive community where we kind of empower older people to go down this route where they are willing to accept that, yes, they're not too old to learn. And yes, they will make mistakes once in a while, but it's not just about giving up as soon as you hit a roadblock, but it's about learning what you can do better and then starting that process all over again. I think that might help. And yeah, so does that answer your question?
Yes, I think to some extent. I think it's true that I think older people, they maybe sort of hesitant for learning new things, not necessarily because they can't, but because they haven't had to for a long time. Usually once you enter the labor market and once you find your vocation, you learn by doing most of the time. I mean, many people, if they're not in sort of higher education jobs, they more or less learn by doing, and they learn gradually. But this is a new experience. It's a new way of learning, basically, for many of them. But you can see that in the younger people as well. If they are exposed to something that is sort of where they can't sort of build on something they already know, they can also be very reluctant. And what happens once you leave the labor market? You actually can say no. I mean, if you're in a job, you have to learn the new stuff or leave. So it's also a freedom you get when you get old. I can see that from many of the elderly people I've interviewed. They find a freedom, and I find that all this technology stuff sort of encroaches on that freedom to basically say, no, I'm done with that now. And I understand the necessity. Of course, as a society, we can be better at making things more accessible for elderly people as well, for anybody, as some of your examples show. There was a Danish bank that made a special version of their mobile banking system for the elderly, which turns out to be a big hit with the young people, because basically 80% of what a mobile banking platform can, nobody ever uses, or very few people use it, and then they use a small sliver of all the time, so the other stuff gets in the way. So it's a basic, I think it's a, designing for everybody is a because there's this danger if you focus on the elderly too much, you forget all the other people that have similar or other issues that reflect their position in life, their level of education, their exposure to technology, their resources. It's not that I don't think you should look at the elderly, that's fine. I've done that myself, but sometimes there are lessons to be learned from the elderly that we can take into the rest of society as well, I think.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And I think what my research kind of showed is that there are things that even the youth can sometimes learn from the elderly in terms of technology use, and so of course the older people can learn from the youth. So it could be like an intergenerational discourse, which I think is really very important. And of course, there is no point in focusing, I mean, in terms of website design and usability, there is no point focusing only on elderly. It's important to focus on everybody in general, but then it has to be designed in such a way that it should be usable to the elderly as well. And I think what we found from our research is, I didn't really go into this finding, but the literature shows that people can be very easily deceived by hoaxes. And in our study, we actually, during that online navigation, we exposed participants to some news which were fake. I mean, we knew that they were verified as false, and we asked them to kind of process them and talk us through their experiences. And we found that older people, contrary to the literature and contrary to assumptions, they were not really getting deceived by hoaxes. They were really very cautious. They always took information with a pinch of salt. And it could be because we were interviewing the so-called tech-savvy older people because they were using the internet. But we thought that this could be really an interesting lesson that the youth could take a leaf out of their book in terms of not being deceived. Because I think, of course, the reason why they were not getting deceived is that they adopted this if in doubt, avoid approach. As soon as they found anything suspicious, they were just willing to avoid. Whereas youth, sometimes they don't take information with a pinch of salt to this much extent, and that's why they can be deceived. So I think what will be really helpful is if there is a family where with 3 generations, if the grandmother is talking to the grandchildren about their experiences and their challenges, digital challenges and their coping strategies, and if the grandmother is sharing their experiences with the grandchildren, I think that's when we will have a not completely, but a greater inclusive online community.
Thank you so much. If there are any other questions? Okay, I don't think so. Thank you so much, Mr. Banerjee, for your presentation, and Dr. Crow. And with that, we'll end the session here.
Hey, thank you so much for your time,
Thank you
for letting us share with you today.